Hello Internet, so nice to see you. So we are here today again for another round of your questions.
So let's see here. Are you saying that with diminished chords, any note in the chord can be the root note?
Yes, in a diminished 7th chord, every note can be the root note. Why? Because the chord is symmetric. If I take the C diminished chord, made by the notes C, E flat, G flat, and some nitpicker at this point would like me to write B flat flat, but we all know that this note is exactly the same as A, okay? But if then I look at the intervals between those notes, there are 3 half steps here, 3 half steps here, 3 half steps here, and if the next C note there are other 3 half steps. You see that it's the same distance. This chord is completely symmetric. If now I put the E flat at the base, and I write E flat, G flat, B double flat, and at this point some nitpickers will ask me to write a D double flat rather than C, which is the same, E flat, okay, which means those two chords are the same chord, they have the same note, but this is C diminished 7, this is E flat diminished 7. Since all those notes have the same distances from one to the other, any one of them can be the root. That's the beauty of the diminished chord. They are ambiguous, and that's why they are so useful. This sound here, it's the same as this sound here, but your brain can interpret them in 2 different ways, so you can use them as a bridge to go from one key to a completely different key.
You had a live class? What?
I periodically have live classes, and I announce them on my newsletter on musictheoryforguitar.com. So if you want to know when the next time I'm live or doing something like that, you have to be on my newsletter on musictheoryforguitar.com. You can go there right now and subscribe.
Can we call this scale Lydian sharp 6?
The Dorian sharp 4th scale works this way. We first write a Dorian scale. Let's see. In A, we'll have the Dorian scale will be A, B, C, D, E, F, sharp, G. And then, since it's a Dorian sharp 4th, we sharp the 4th note of the key. Great, that's the Dorian sharp 4th. If we do the same with Lydian, and then we do the Lydian sharp 6, we obtain a completely different scale. Because if the Lydian scale in A, it's A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E, F, sharp, G, sharp. If now I sharp this 6, I will have an F double sharp. That's an incorrect notation. The correct notation will be F, X. X means double sharp, but many people don't know that, so I'm just putting this one so that it's clear. And this would be a Lydian sharp 6. I don't see how you can relate these to that. Maybe there is a way, but I don't see it. But for me, those two are 2 completely different scales.
Don't you think harmonizing isn't the right way to look at exotic scales like these? Many of these scales come from improvising traditions and played without any harmonic accompaniment.
If we start thinking about where the scales come from and how they were used originally, then we get into a rabbit hole that it will never end. Also because the very same scale appear in several different traditions. We have harmonic minor in the Western canon, but the very same scale appear at least in the Persian tradition, in the Indian tradition, and in a few other traditions. And all those cultures use those scales in a completely different way. What I like personally, and it's just my personal taste about those scales, is that I can use those different collection of pitches to create interesting harmony. Because my interest when I compose music, it's in complex harmony. That doesn't mean that this is your interest or there is anything right or wrong about that. It's just what I do. What I found, though, is that you can really grasp the sound of a scale by hearing the chords. At least for us Western listeners, that we have been born and grown and baked into this idea of listening to harmony, having the chord gives us a much more intuitive perception than if we were to play the scale as a melodic pattern. Of course, your mileage may be different. You may have different ideas or different perception. If you understand scales better as melodic pattern, then that's the way I would recommend you to learn them. I found that for me and for most of my listeners, listening to the chords gives a much more direct and intuitive perception. And again, it's not that one thing is right or wrong. It's two different ways of trying to understand the same object. And now, of course, there are ways that those scales can be used in a more traditionally correct way in other specific tradition. Like there are specific ways in which this scale can be used more correctly in the Western tradition. Let's not forget that, for instance, some scales like harmonic minor or melodic minor may have the different inflection of the notes depending if you go up or down, traditionally speaking, and there are other peculiarity to them. But one idea will be that to not only look at the past, not only look at the tradition. Let's look at the tradition for what we can learn, but let's also look at the future and see what else we can do with the scales. Let's take all those information and let's compose the music of the future. And in this case, if you want to learn a specific tradition, do it, it's great. But let's also not be imprisoned by the tradition and see what else we can do with all these beautiful bonanza of material.
Can you say, "I want to drink your blood" in your creepiest voice? Haha, thank you.
I want to drink your blood.
You want, you need a V in there.
I want you. I want to drink your blood.
You need a V in there. Va.
I want to drink your blood.
I'm new to guitar playing. I use tab. Sight reading is not something I have time to develop as a skill. Should I try going to the trouble of memorizing notes on the fretboard?
Yes, you should, because the point of knowing the notes on the fretboard is not just to be able to sight read. The point of knowing the notes on your fretboard is to understand what you are playing and understanding what music are you playing and how to make new music. Sight reading is only one of the many possible activities you can do as a musician that requires you to know the notes on the fretboard, but by all means not the only one, and in my humble opinion, not even the most important one. It's much more important for you to learn to know the notes on the fretboard so you can understand how, for instance, scales are built or chords are built, or you can have an idea of exactly what you are playing. And those are things that grow little by little. So you start by learning what are the notes on your fretboard, and you start understanding how those notes come together, and you build this kind of knowledge little by little until you finally grasp how music works. But don't deprive yourself of a complete understanding of your music simply because you don't want to learn the notes on the fretboard. It's not as hard as it seems. I have a video about that. And once you've done it, really a lot of the world of musical expression, a lot of new possibilities open up in front of you. So don't deprive yourself of that just because you think that this is just a sight reading thing. It's not a sight reading thing.